The news broke, shattering the morning calm and sending shockwaves through every corner of the country. It was like a thunderclap on a cold December morning, sudden, jarring, and impossible to ignore. People paused in their tracks, breath visible in the frosty air, as the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Just 2 days before Christmas, headlines were upended. SCOTUS strikes down federal gun permit law. The story dominated every front page, every news alert, every conversation. Across TV screens, anchors struggled to process the seismic shift. Their voices trembled with urgency, trying to make sense of what had just happened and what it would mean for millions of Americans. Maps flashed on screens, showing states instantly changing from red to green. Decades of regulation swept away in a single moment. The legal landscape was transformed before viewers' eyes. December 23, 2025, was instantly etched into history, a date that would be remembered for generations as the day everything changed. Newsrooms, police stations, and law offices buzzed with confusion and urgency. Phones rang off the hook as officials scrambled to interpret the ruling and its immediate effects. Protesters gathered at the Supreme Court, their chants lost in the winter wind. Some held signs in defiance, others in celebration, but all were united by a sense of disbelief. Social media erupted. SCOTUS guns trended within minutes with fierce debate on both sides. Arguments, celebrations, and fears flooded every platform as the nation tried to process the news in real time. Supporters called it a Christmas miracle for liberty. They cheered, waved flags, and spoke of restored freedoms and constitutional rights finally upheld. Opponents, however, warned of chaos and pleaded for action. They worried about public safety, about the sudden loss of oversight, and about what the future might hold. The ruling bypassed months of deliberation, leaving a legal vacuum. Judges and lawyers stared at overturned precedents, unsure how to proceed. Mayors and police chiefs were pulled from holiday gatherings for emergency calls, their faces etched with concern as they tried to reassure their communities and coordinate a response. Overnight, established procedures vanished, leaving millions staring into a legal abyss. Families huddled around televisions, searching for answers that no one yet had. The shockwaves were just beginning, and the nation braced for the consequences. In homes, offices, and on the streets, a single question echoed: what happens now? The Supreme Court's emergency ruling was a legal bombshell. It struck down the core of may-issue permit systems in states like California and New York. Overnight, these states became shall issue. If you passed a background check, you got a permit. Local officials lost their power to deny permits based on subjective standards. The change was immediate and binding. No time for gradual adjustment. In New York City and Los Angeles, long-standing vetting processes were nullified. The entire philosophy of discretionary permitting was dismantled. Legal uncertainty exploded. What about pending or past denials? Could people sue? States and cities were left scrambling to interpret and implement the new reality. The aftershocks rippled through every level of government. For gun rights supporters, it was a moment of vindication, a long-awaited victory that many believed was overdue. Years of legal battles and passionate advocacy had finally paid off, and the sense of triumph was palpable in the air. Organizations celebrated, calling it the biggest Second Amendment win in a generation. Leaders of advocacy groups declared that the decision would reshape the landscape of gun rights in America, and their supporters echoed these sentiments with cheers and applause. They argued the ruling restored equal rights for all law-abiding citizens, insisting that the ability to defend oneself should not be limited by arbitrary government restrictions. For many, it was about more than just firearms. It was about personal freedom and constitutional guarantees. Social media filled with stories of people denied permits for arbitrary reasons. Posts went viral, with individuals sharing their frustrations and relief that, finally, their voices had been heard by the highest court in the land. Gun ranges planned celebrations, membership in advocacy groups soared. Across the country, people flocked to join organizations they felt had fought for their rights. And gun shops reported a surge in interest from new and returning customers alike. For them, the court had finally affirmed the right to self-defense outside the home. Many saw this as a crucial step toward ensuring their safety and the safety of their families, believing that the ruling would empower responsible citizens everywhere. On the other side, gun control advocates were horrified. The decision felt like a devastating setback, undoing years of progress toward what they saw as common-sense safety measures. Mayors predicted a rise in gun violence and mourned the loss of a key safeguard. City officials warned that the ruling could make it harder to keep communities safe, especially in areas already struggling with gun-related crime. Vigils were held, and calls for new legislation intensified. Across the nation, activists gathered to honor victims of gun violence and to demand that lawmakers take urgent action to prevent future tragedies. The hashtag #SockInch blood on their hands trended alongside celebratory ones. Social media became a battleground, with both sides passionately defending their positions and trading accusations about the consequences of the ruling. Opponents felt abandoned, believing public safety had been sacrificed. Many expressed fear and frustration, worried that the decision would lead to more violence and make it harder to protect vulnerable communities. The ruling didn't end the debate, it ignited it. Across dinner tables, in city halls, and on television screens, Americans argued fiercely about what the decision meant for the future of the country. America was more divided than ever. The ruling drew a sharp line between those who saw it as a triumph for liberty and those who viewed it as a dangerous step backward, leaving the nation grappling with deep and passionate disagreements about rights, safety, and the meaning of freedom. Local governments were thrown into chaos. Phones rang non-stop in city halls and police departments as citizens demanded answers. Clerks and officers had no guidance. Procedures were obsolete overnight. Police chiefs worried, should they approve all pending applications? What about red flags? Licensing divisions were paralyzed, unsure how to proceed. Some offices suspended permit processing entirely, fueling public frustration. Cities faced huge logistical and financial burdens. New staff, retraining, redesigned forms. Lawyers scrambled to draft emergency ordinances, but every move risked legal challenges. The line between compliance and defiance was razor thin. The court had drawn a new boundary, but no one knew exactly where it lay. Uncertainty reigned. At the center of the storm was Sarah Harrison, a name that, until recently, was unknown to most Americans. She was not a politician, not a celebrity, but an ordinary woman whose life would soon become the focus of a national conversation. At 38, Sarah was a single mother juggling the demands of raising 2 children while working long, exhausting shifts as an overnight nurse. Her days blurred into nights, and her world revolved around her family and her patients. But everything changed one evening when, walking home from work, she was mugged just steps from her apartment building. The fear and vulnerability she felt that night would stay with her. Determined never to feel powerless again, Sarah enrolled in a handgun safety course, learned the laws, and purchased a firearm for protection. She followed every rule, every step required by the state. But when she applied for a permit to carry, her application was denied. The reason? She hadn't demonstrated a unique threat beyond what any other citizen might face. The denial left Sarah feeling helpless and frustrated. She began to question why her right to defend herself and her children was being treated as a privilege reserved for a select few, rather than a basic right for all. Refusing to accept this, Sarah reached out for help. A civil rights foundation took up her cause, connecting her with lawyers who believed her story could make a difference. In court, her legal team argued that the law unfairly discriminated against ordinary people like Sarah, by making it nearly impossible for them to exercise their right to self-defense. As the case gained attention, Sarah found herself at the center of a legal battle that would reach all the way to the Supreme Court. She became the lead plaintiff, her name now synonymous with the fight for equal rights under the law. Through it all, Sarah remained grounded in her daily life, caring for her children, working her shifts, and trying to provide a sense of normalcy. She was not a political activist, but a working mom who simply wanted to feel safe in her own neighborhood. Her story put a human face on a heated national debate. The case, now known as Harrison versus State, became the vehicle for a historic Supreme Court ruling. It was no longer just about Sarah, it was about the rights of millions of Americans. When the decision was finally announced, Sarah's name was everywhere, on the front pages of newspapers, on television screens, and in conversations across the country. Sarah Harrison became the face of a movement. Her courage and determination inspired countless others, and her fight for justice changed the course of American history. In the Supreme Court, Harrison versus State was a clash of two visions. Sarah's lawyers argued that May-issue laws turned a right into a privilege, violating the Second Amendment. They traced the right to public self-defense back to the nation's founding. The state countered that May-issue laws were a constitutional tradition, vital for public safety. They warned of cities flooded with concealed firearms if the laws fell. The state argued for local control and pointed to lower crime rates under stricter laws. Both sides presented history, statistics, and passionate pleas. The justices faced a stark choice: individual rights or collective safety. The Supreme Court's decision was a narrow 5-4 split, mirroring the nation's divide. The majority declared the Second Amendment protects carrying handguns for self-defense outside the home. They dismantled May-issue regimes, calling them unconstitutional. The ruling set a new standard: gun laws must align with historical tradition. The dissent warned of dire consequences: more gun violence, less public safety. They accused the majority of ignoring real-world impacts and paralyzing legislatures. The debate was not just legal, but deeply personal and emotional. The ruling opened the door to future legal challenges. The nation's ideological rift had never been clearer. The ruling forced states to scramble. Governors halted enforcement of old permit laws and ordered new shall-issue systems, but states didn't surrender. They shifted to restricting where guns could be carried. Lawmakers proposed bans in parks, transit, restaurants, and commercial areas. Cities tried to slow permits with higher fees and tougher training. Every new rule risked another lawsuit. Gun rights groups vowed to challenge any perceived defiance. Responses varied. Some states adapted quickly, others were caught off guard. The result: a patchwork of laws and ongoing legal battles. The Supreme Court had answered one question, but sparked many more. The decision landed in an America where gun ownership was already changing. More women, minorities, and urban residents were buying guns for self-defense. For them, the ruling was about safety, not politics. Many new owners supported training and background checks, seeking empowerment, not ideology. The ruling gave them access to permits once out of reach. But more guns in public raised tough questions. Would it stop crime or fuel violence? The nation faced a reckoning over the balance between rights and security. As Christmas approached, America stood at a crossroads. The Supreme Court had redrawn the debate. The consequences, good or bad, remained unknown. The nation's future now hung in the balance.